So hello again and welcome to the next in our series of lockdown webcasts that we're bringing you from Travel Weekly to keep you all connected during this period of real uncertainty and challenge as we are facing the COVID-19 pandemic. So today I am joined by Andrew Monk. He is the Chief Executive of VSA Capital. Andrew has been an investment banker for over 30 years. And I know, Andrew, you've always kept a very close eye on the travel and tourism and leisure sector. I know it's not where you are particularly focused. You look at lots of different sectors, but certainly it's been one of interest for you over the years. And so I wanted to ask you really about your views on where travel is at the moment. It's obviously been hit pretty hard, but what's your initial observations?
Yeah, hi Lucy, always good to talk to you. And yeah, look, it's a sector I find fascinating and tend to have some fairly controversial views. Look, I mean, unfortunately, there is only one answer to your question, which is it's not great at the moment. It's not good at all. And you've got to feel very sorry, particularly for a lot of the people whose fault it just isn't, who unfortunately are going to be suffering. But it's in a bad way and it's going to remain in quite a big way for some time. But what I say to a lot of people about this coronavirus, if you look at, for instance, what the travel industry went through when the internet came along, the internet came and stayed. The changes that took place clearly were long-term fundamental changes that did change the way we operated. We suddenly started going online and it changed a lot, particularly in your industry. Coronavirus is slightly different. It's come, but it will go away. So the only sort of major changes we're seeing, probably longer term, are the ones that were going to happen anyway. Now, I think there were quite a few changes that were due to happen in the travel industry anyway. And what you will see now is simply they will be accelerated.
Okay, and when you say that, do you mean around health and safety procedures and things that are going to be necessary to enable us to sort of open up borders and travel globally again?
I think I think the industry had got to a stage where a lot of people were questioning certain things. I mean, obviously the biggest one was Greta saying, look, are we all just traveling too much for the sake of it? Are we doing? And people were listening, but thinking, no, I still want to jump on a plane. Things like that will start to accelerate. I think, you do see a lot of question marks over, we're seeing with EasyJet, for instance, at the moment, Stelios is saying, why are you buying more and more and more planes? We just can't cope with it. And so people are going to start to question, well, yes, do we need to keep putting on more and more and more planes? Maybe we didn't. Maybe there was a different formula. People were packing more people into the planes. Are people going to go, actually, you know what, maybe prices have to go up a bit and we put a few in? I see, Mike Goulier is coming out and saying the whole way that we did, ABTA and ATOL and all of this sort of stuff was wrong. And why were companies using, customers' money to fund their businesses? And things like that maybe now can have a fundamental change to actually make a stronger, better industry longer term, but it will take a few years to get there.
Yeah. So you're saying that, we all obviously are talking about when it comes back and we want it all to go back to normal, but you're saying that actually it's unlikely to ever go back to that sort of scale and real sort of speed and pace that we were used to. And you think actually there will be a natural contraction or slowing down, do you think?
I think contraction is maybe the wrong word. Maybe slowing down is a better word. I think one of the things, as you know, for some years before this, I've been getting pretty nervous about the state of the airline industry, and actually it's sort of been wrong. One of the things about the airline industry was that it's a highly leveraged industry, as is tour operating, your whole industry. It's leveraged both from an operational point of view, but also, don't forget, from a financial point of view. It actually has double leverage because people were able to fund these aeroplanes with very cheap finance. And, don't get me wrong, cheap finance is going to stay for some time probably because interest rates are basically zero. But when you get double leverage like that, you can grow very, very fast. But boy, then when it comes and smacks you in the face, the bigger you are, the harder you fall. It's saying, yeah, you're going to fall hard. And that's really what's caught up with a lot of your industry is this double leverage that's been going on. I think that people will step back now and go, actually, you know what? Let's slow down the pace a little bit. Let's just have a review of how we want to operate. Look, I happen to live in Chiswick, and so you'd think I'm anti the Heathrow's third runway. Actually, I'm not. I'm pro it because I'm a great believer that we need a fantastic airport facility for our international trading ability. But now, with everything that's happened, is Heathrow's third runway going to be built? Probably not. There will be a general, I think, slowing down and a more gradual pace in the development of the industry.
Yeah. And you mentioned there, you said yourself, the bigger you are, the harder you fall. I mean, obviously, we saw yesterday British Airways announcing the consultation of up to 12,000 members of staff. Do you think that's likely, to the tip of the iceberg, and we're going to see a lot more of that in the airline industry from other carriers?
Well, I mean, at the moment, basically no flying, so everybody to a certain extent has to either be laid off or obviously there's the furlough system at the moment. Look, I mean, the good thing with British Airways is British Airways will survive. It's the national carrier. Yes, it's a quoted company under IAG, but that will survive. Actually, I believe that Virgin will survive as well.
How will they survive? Will they get a bailout from the government, or will they get external investment?
I think it'll be a combination of things, actually. And again, I think, people use this word bailout like sort of the government's giving them money. Actually, the government will loan them money, which will have to be repaid back. Actually, if you look at Virgin, obviously the other shareholder is Delta, and they are being given money by the US government. We could play a clever game where the US government funds Delta that funds Virgin, and we just put a little bit and keep it going. So we're always getting the US government to fund it. But Virgin is a very good, I actually have a lot of time for Richard Branson. He's created a lot of jobs, a lot of wealth within the UK economy. It's a real business, Virgin. So I'm less critical of him, to be honest with you, and admire him. And I think Virgin is a very good carrier. I would like to see it continue, and I believe it will. I think, let's be clear, we are in this country leaders in this industry. We are better than virtually everybody around the world, which is a fantastic position to be in. But clearly there are going to be consequences, and some of the smaller players are going to have to rethink, rejig. And look, let's also be clear, over time, you do slowly get back to normal, and there will be the ability to refinance some of these companies through equity, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, us in the city, we are actually having I know this is not what your viewers may want to hear, but we're having a very good year because everybody's coming to us saying, help, 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 can you refinance us? And yes, we will probably collectively across the city refinance virtually every company in the UK within the next 12 months. So we will have a pretty good year. But yes, it will slowly occur, and people will get refinanced. The industry will rebuild. It's just there may be different winners and in a slightly different structure.
And so, so there's, and you've talked about some of the winners, and BA, Virgin will probably be fine, but who will the losers be then, Andrew? The ones who can't refinance, or who's most at risk, would you say?
I think, look, the bigger ones and the quoted ones are going to find it easier, which is why I would put the EasyJets and the Ryanairs. They'll almost certainly be fine, and they're not too big to fall, but they're big enough.
We said that, of course, about Thomas Cook. I know that's another issue, but people did think Thomas Cook would never fade. The oldest travel brand in history, 178 years old, and that went by the wayside.
Yeah, I mean, look, as you know, and I've said it quite publicly, Thomas Cook failed basically because of the management had their eye completely off the ball, and in my view, they allowed it to fail. It shouldn't have failed. Had it not failed when it did, it would have failed now in coronavirus days. So maybe it was just as well it did. But I think, look, let's be clear. If you're a small, probably more on the tour operating side, or if you're a small airline, you've probably gone already. A lot of them already had gone. The Flybe went, as soon as it started getting into trouble anyway. But the small players, the non-quoted players, they're going to find it a lot harder to get hold of equity. Sure, they may be able to go to the government and get a £50,000 loan or something, but that doesn't really bail them out. Loans do have to be repaid.
Yeah, of course. I guess what I wanted to really ask you then, what the view in the city is of travel. I mean, we mentioned there Thomas Cook, that was a very high profile failure. The industry is now everyone's seen parts of this industry all over the national news. Cruise, for example, has been in the headlights. So what is the view of the city and of investors in the travel industry as a sort of a promising sector to look at going forward?
Well, I think, again, it had got quite excited and it had ramped a lot of these share prices up to really pretty high levels, although they were starting to come off probably from last summer, partially because of Thomas Cook. People were starting to go, oh, hang on a second, these industries are highly leveraged. Then working out they're double leveraged, and yes, they can fail. So the decline in share prices was already starting to take place, and this has probably accelerated it. I think, look, the city is sensible enough to realise that it's an industry that will survive. It will have been reminded just what a dangerous industry it potentially can be. And so therefore any refinancing they're doing will be done at prices well below perhaps what would have been expected a year ago.
Right.
And it'll be tough on people who maybe big shareholders who maybe can't follow through with it. I mean, but then that's the risks you take in this industry. I mean, again, we've been around, well, I've been around long enough because I'm a lot older than you are, Lucy. You're very young. You go back to the 80s and the 90s, we regularly had failures of companies. It was happening all the time because it is a dangerous industry. It was just really that in the last probably 10, 15 years or so, actually it seemed to be one-way traffic. Everyone was succeeding. But again, it all comes down, particularly after GFC, there was this cheap finance available. You could get aircraft on incredibly cheap terms. Aircraft were becoming far more efficient. You could pack them in. Everybody had lots of money. It was, let's go on 3 holidays a year. I mean, are we actually now all going to be going on 3 holidays a year? I don't know. It may just go down to 2 a year or 1 a year. And likewise, as you know, I do a lot of international business travel. I have an office in Shanghai. I have an office in Johannesburg. I operate all around the world. I've learned how to do Zoom pretty well. And so maybe I'll just do more Zoom calls and a little bit
Well, they
less
are
travel.
saying actually business travel will be the last to come back. It could be that very reason. People have realised they probably can do business, can't they, over a video call?
Well, we've just, for instance, sent out a notice to all of our potential clients in Australia and Canada, where we do a lot of business, saying, look, rather than you flying to London, certainly in the short term, but we're happy to carry it on longer term, rather than the cost of a flight to London, all the hotels, and it does add up, we'll do you a complete roadshow around London using Zoom. Now, so yes, I think business, the only thing really going for business class travelers is that you can claim it's social distancing because you've got more space between the seats.
I'll tell you what we should be investing in. People should be investing in Zoom, shouldn't they? That's the.
Well, I think unfortunately that trick's already been played, and some people, of course, invested in the wrong Zoom, just happened to have the name Zoom, but actually had nothing to do with the Zoom video.
Oh, no.
So be careful when you're investing. Yeah, look, I mean, again, I think that those sort of changes, so, the advent of Zoom was coming in anyway. We were all just starting to play with it and starting to use Teams and that sort of thing. So what this is doing is accelerating that change. It was sort of going to happen anyway. We're accelerating the change. And this has certainly accelerated the change to using Zoom and Teams. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'd probably do about 10, 15 Zoom or Teams calls a day now.
Yeah.
And, we're functioning pretty well on it. In fact, I'm getting a little bit worried about whether I'll ever get my staff back into the office. I think I can by 3-line whip. But,
I'm sure you will. So if business travel may suffer then, Andrew, I mean, some other people are saying that perhaps sort of luxury travel may come back first. I mean, you made that point about if you're in business class, is a bit, I know you were being a bit flippant about the social distancing, but I mean, where do you or which companies or which sectors of travel do you think will come back first?
I think that's a very, very good question. So I think that the luxury end, people who have got enough money that they can afford to do things, will come back because they're going to always do it. And you're right, they can spend money and they can fly in away, don't necessarily, get private jets. The private jet market could do quite well out of this. So I think you will see that come back in. I think, actually, dare I say it, the bottom end of the market probably will also come back in because these are people who, frankly, they just want to get a bit of cheap sun and sea or whatever else and a load of drinks on the cheap. And they probably, oh hell, they're not going to worry too much about coronavirus. Eventually, they'll forget about it. It's probably that.
Even before a vaccine, you think people will still just say, I just want to get away?
Again, just to put it into context, I don't know about you, but this weekend, I mean, I live in Chiswick, which probably isn't lower class, probably more middle class. But I went out this weekend for my daily bike ride, which I'm allowed to do under government rules. The number of people just wandering up and down the high road had increased significantly. Now, they were all wearing masks, and that's another subject I'll come on to about how we travel. But I think that people people do eventually go, no, hell, I want to go back. I want my this. Now that the sort of middle segment, they often sometimes have a choice between maybe a Mediterranean holiday. They may say, you know what, actually we won't do the Mediterranean holiday, but we'll do one in Cornwall or Norfolk or that sort of an area. So I can see a bit of movement
domestic
there.
travel getting a bit of a boost.
Yeah, whereas I think, your classic Ryanair customer, he wants to go off for his week in the sun, he's going to do it, whatever. Now, so I can see that. I also think, by the way, one of the other things that people have asked me, will cruising ever come back? Because clearly cruising sort of got the highlights of these ships that became absolutely, pits almost. But that's always, actually, cruising has always had that. I mean, when you had sometimes you got these sort of stomach bugs and things that went through a whole cruise ship. And that, if you go into any confined space like that, that will happen. I actually think that cruising will come back. It's very American-led, of course. So funny enough, I think cruising looks one of the better industries to come back in, because people have thought it's really bad, but I think that will bounce back again. Now, the other thing, though, is how we travel ourselves, and no one knows the answer. But I think, certainly I spend a lot of time in Asia traveling, and I'm completely used to, and have been for years and years and years, when I walk through an airport to be temperature checked. You are everywhere in Asian airports. Yeah. It's totally normal. I'm amazed that Heathrow and Gatwick don't have it. Why wouldn't you have it? It's so simple and so easy to do. So we will all be temperature checked. No question about that. I think when flying, you will see people probably being tempted to wear masks and things. Again, if you fly on an Asian airline, a lot of people do wear masks when they're flying. So we will learn from our Asian counterparts in that respect.
Yeah.
But obviously, short term as well, there will be other, I think, checks potentially. If they can do a check, with a pinprick result in 10 minutes, maybe we get that. Maybe you get a bit of a vaccine paper to say it's safe to travel. That'll just be short term. But yeah, temperature checks.
It's complex though. It's complex though, something like a cruise, because you might develop an illness or symptoms halfway around your cruise, and you get off at one place and then you get back on again. And it's what happens if you're halfway around your cruise and then you get your checks or your blood test or whatever, and you've picked something up halfway around. I mean, this has all got to be worked through, hasn't it?
It has. I mean, there is a lot of logistics that are going to have to be worked through. But again, we all remember, sadly, after sort of the disasters of 9/11 and things like that, how airports change with security. Yeah. And security, again, is even today is evolving. Let's be honest. I mean, at one stage, I think it was one of the most nightmarish things you could ever have at an airport, the sort of security that we're putting in. Whereas now some airports, not all of them, I'd have to say, but I think, for instance, I use Heathrow a lot, particularly the British Airways, where I am a gold card holder at the moment, so I don't lose it because I can't fly. Their check-in process now is so smooth and so adapted, should we say, to the business traveller. You hardly notice it.
Yeah.
So
we get used to it. These are all things that will come in, but you're saying, oh, we'll eventually get used to them.
Yeah, you will eventually. It'll just become habit. And again, temperature checking is so easy. You just walk past a camera. And by the way, it's not just in Asia. They do it in, when I go to Johannesburg, they do it in South Africa. They check. Yeah. In truth, I think temperature checking, by the way, you won't just have at airports. You'll have it when you go into any sort of office building or shopping mall, potentially.
Right, and hotels, presumably, and all that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to pick up on what you said, the word that the industry has always been dangerous, and I think you were talking about the cheap finance and things, but you also mentioned Mike Gooley's point around the way that the industry operates in terms of the cash position that a lot of businesses are in. So what do you think will happen there? Do you think Mike Gooley has got a point? Do you think there will be a change to the way the industry operates itself?
He has got a point. There's no question about that. And it is extraordinary, really, when you think about it, that some travel companies are able to exist by using customers' money to keep the business going before they then pay for the product, shall we say. I mean, if you go into a shop, you hand your money over as you get the product. And that is the normal way of doing a transaction. So it is very unusual, the travel industry. And I suspect that not everybody fully understands how it works. That's the customers, by the way.
Well, and that of course is the issue at the moment, because lots of customers, wanting refunds for holidays they have booked and not taken, but the money has obviously been passed up the line, you know, up the pipeline to the tour operator, to the hotel, and it's or the cruise line, etc. And I think there is a big job explaining that to consumers.
There's a huge job. So again, I think this is one of the changes that probably should have been coming in, and that what this will do is simply accelerate it. Because I think the days of, you know, it has got a lot better. You see less tour operators going under now. But you know, it is a concept that is really not acceptable and needed a bit of change. You know, at the end of the day, you know, if you pay your money for a product, you should be given that product. For somebody else to use that money in the meantime, it is, I mean, if nothing else, it's morally wrong, really. But it's an issue the industry has always had.
Yeah.
So I think it would be a good opportunity for the industry, perhaps, to sort that out. I mean, the industry needs to just make itself a much stronger industry, really. I mean, the demand is still going to be there. People are still going to want to travel and go on holiday. That's the good news for your industry. There's still going to be huge demand. Use this opportunity to get things better. And I'm doing it with my business. I'm not going, as I say, through the same issues that the travel industry is going through, but I'm looking at ways that I can use this opportunity to strengthen my business. And I would say exactly the same to any travel company that's suffering at the moment. Okay, look, it's not fun, but use it as an opportunity to see how you can make yourself stronger. And it may be that you make it stronger by adapting your own business. It may be that you merge with somebody else. It may be you do this. There's all sorts of things that you can think about.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned mergers there. I mean, do you think that any sort of movement or reshaping of the industry will be or could be led by sort of trade mergers and or takeovers? Do you think that's more likely really now than investment, or do you think there's still people that will think, oh, actually, it's a good time to invest while people are, or while companies?
I think it'll be a combination of both, to be honest with you. I mean, again, the problem again in your industry, mergers are quite difficult sometimes, particularly for instance, the airline industry. There's regulatory concerns and that sort of thing. So it's not quite as simple as perhaps where I'm sitting. But yeah, look, if you're I'm a small business in the city. If you were a small business in the travel industry, you may be thinking, I can do it myself, everything's booming. But now you might say, you know what, I might just bring that guy up the road because he's not a bad guy. Maybe together we can do a bit better. Or maybe if you
numbers.
Well, unfortunately, numbers do help, and it may be that he has a complementary product or a complementary business line. You can always take a little bit of cost out. There's no question about that. So it's just, you have to open up your mind, I think, and see what's out there.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about, because obviously there's been quite a lot of private equity investment in travel over the years. They've made, they've had quite a good time of it, really. There's been sort of some of the OTAs, some of the sort of the modern businesses, and then even some of the older ones like your Rivieras and classic collections. There's been some really, interesting people coming into the space. But we had one guy this week, Oliver Brendan from ATG Travel Service, saying, travel is risky and volatile. And so he was saying, welcome to travel, private equity, because of course they're now like, oh, it's not as great perhaps as we thought it was. So do you think it's an end? Do you think that COVID-19 will see an end to sort of private equity coming in and seeing travel as a really good investment, or do you think they'll still be tempted?
No, it won't be the end. And I think, again, private equity tends to come in when they can do financial engineering, i.e. financial leverage. So where you have an industry where you can have financial leverage and operational leverage, it's ideal for them, isn't it? And they don't mind actually that it's risky, because their game is to try and get out before it all falls over. So yeah, they'll come back in again, and there'll be opportunities for them to come in and pick things up at incredibly cheap levels and refinance it. I am actually talking personally to a group of people where we're thinking of creating a company and listing it purely with the intention of buying companies off the administrator.
Really?
Sounds pretty harsh, but the opportunities will be there, and the administrator will be stuck with a few companies, and we'll go in and say, fine, we'll take it for zero.
In the travel and leisure space, even, Andrew, might you look in our world?
It is a leisure company we're looking to put together, so we could even be looking in your world. I love your world, but we're also looking. I'll be honest with you, the main people behind are in the pubs and restaurants area. Clearly there's going to be some amazing opportunities, but it's a leisure concept.
Yeah.
So,
Vehicle.
so
Okay.
we'll look at that. The other thing is, actually, I think that, again, coming back to the fact that the UK we've got some fantastic brands, some fantastic capabilities. I think that although, for instance, the Chinese clearly didn't do too well out of Thomas Cook, Fosun in particular, they actually will eventually come back in again. Again, I'm obviously talking with my colleagues in my Shanghai office, and they keep giving me a shopping list of what they want to buy. And for most of it, I have to say, no, you can't have that, because they're looking for artificial intelligence, technology, biotech. I just go, no way is the government at the moment going to let you buy those sort of companies. But travel and leisure is on their shopping list. You know, they understand. Oh, absolutely.
And this is other companies, not just Fosun. There must be plenty of other companies who would like us.
Absolutely, because the Chinese have this population of 1.3 billion. They have 600 million people, basically, with a lot of money. Shanghai alone, you know, is the same as England, and they are very wealthy people in Shanghai. They all drive Porsches and BMWs. You'd be amazed if you go there. It's a very cosmopolitan city. I love it. But they all want to travel, and they all want to get out there and see things and learn things. And they do admire the British expertise in this industry.
And then, are they more comfortable traveling with a company that's Chinese owned, even if it, you know, remains as a British brand and all the rest of it? But is that the point, that, you know, if the Chinese came in and bought up some of these leisure businesses, that would be appealing to the Chinese consumer?
Yeah, they feel much more comfortable with a Western brand.
Oh, do they?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think.
So Western brands, it doesn't matter what the ownership is. If the Chinese can't afford it, then
they like Western. They like Western brands. They like Western products. I mean, you know, the Chinese, if they are quite capable of building their own airliner, for instance.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, the Chinese don't want to fly in a Chinese aircraft. They're quite happy with Boeing or Airbus because they know it's reliable.
Okay.
I'm afraid. Look, I have a lot of admiration for a lot of what the Chinese do. Clearly, there's some issues currently which one has to be very sensitive of. But the Chinese today fully recognise that, you know, the West has much better, we call it precision engineering. You know, we are good at that really complex stuff. The Chinese aren't there yet. They're very good at mass producing things very, very cheaply. But that's not what you want when you're building an airliner.
Okay. All right. Well, look, Andrew, we could carry on chatting for ages, but on that note, I think we're probably finished. It's been fascinating. I knew it would be. I'm delighted that you came on and joined us today. Very excited to hear if your new little leisure venture might touch our world. Obviously, it would be in sad circumstances. It is taking companies out of administration, but, you know, the fact that you may breathe new life in would be great. So we wish you well. Thank you very much for joining us.
Not at all. It was a pleasure. Always happy to talk to you as well, Lucy.